those of you unfamiliar with Natalie Wood, she was basically the Natalie Portman of the 1940s. Born in San Francisco in 1938, sound off in the comments if it's okay to say San Fran. Because some people say that someone, me, is a loser every time I say San Fran. But the other day I was with somebody from San Francisco and I said San Fran, and then she said, oh, I say San Fran too. But everybody keeps telling me that I'm a loser every time I say San Fran. That's just say SF, whatever. So Natalie Wood is born there. In 1938, her father is a carpenter and her mother is a stay-at-home mom. A former pageant girl whose dreams of being a ballerina. Personally, I am always weary when I read about a famous actress that has a mom that also had some Hollywood dreams. It always gets me a little spooked. In every Hollywood story, who is the most dangerous person in this person's life? The mother. The mother with dreams. And there's a smaller person that looks just like them living these dreams. So when Natalie's 4 years old, her parents buy a house in Southern California. And she was noticed by some crew members during a film shoot. If you want another indicator of how different this era was to today, walking your child past a film set was the 1940s equivalent of making them do Labubu TikTok dances. You know what? Pageant moms will always be pageant moms. Also, I wonder if she was standing outside with her child and they ran up to her and they're like, ma'am, oh my God. And she's like, yes. And they're like, your child, she's a star. Like, ah! Either way, it worked out because Natalie Wood made her film debut at the age of 5 in the 1943 movie Happy Land. 4 years later, Natalie starred in Miracle on 34th Street. Incredible movie. Top 5 favorite movies for Christmas. I think if someone's like, my favorite movie is Miracle on 34th Street, I'm like, oh, okay. But top five Christmas movie. So this movie made her a huge star and led to her first Oscar nomination at the age of 15 for the movie Rebel Without a Cause, co-starring James Dean, right? Right after this film, 20th Century Fox sets Natalie up on a date with another one of their actors, Robert Wagner, when she was 18 and he was 26. This was a publicity stunt, but Natalie told People Mag in 1976, quote, I was 10 and he was 18 when I first saw him walking down the hall at 20th Century Fox. I turned to my mother and said, I'm going to marry him. So she probably said this to like somebody at the studio when she was 10, and they're like, what a great PR move. But I'm guessing they did feel like they were falling in love eventually, whatever. In a 2009 interview, Robert talked about one of their dates early on. I remember the instant I fell in love with her. One night on board a small boat I owned. If you know, you know, foreshadowing. One night on a boat I owned, she looked at me with love, with her dark brown eyes lit by a table lantern. That moment changed my life. So I guess she was right. In 1957, a 19-year-old Natalie Wood married Robert Wagner. The couple spent their honeymoon yachting in the Florida Keys. If you know, I also went to the Florida Keys this year. No worries. 1 week out of the year, Brazilian seaweed washes upon the Florida Keys shore. And the seaweed, called seagasm, sargasm, whatever the fuck, smells like poo-poo caca pee-pee, had a baby, and that baby did poo-poo caca pee-pee on everyone's house. And that's the week that I went to the Florida Keys. But I think Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner had a different experience. Good for you. So happy for you. So anyway, they're in the Florida Keys. As a couple, they love being on the water. Though very eerily, Natalie often talked about how she was scared of deep water. My mom, we watched a documentary about her, and my mom said, you know, early in the documentary, she goes, you know, it's so weird. I've seen so many interviews. I have seen so many interviews where Natalie says, I was so scared of deep water. I'm so scared of deep, dark water. So fucking weird. It cannot be emphasized just how famous this couple was, okay? When they were newly married, Natalie and Robert went on a road trip across the United States, and when they made stops, Radio stations would report, oh my God, Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner drove through town. That's how famous they were. Like, they would interview music on the radio and be like, this just in, Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner drove through our town, okay? Shortly after, Natalie did Splendor in the Grass with Warren Beatty, which, if you remember from last week's episode, Warren is a pussy magnet. Well, sorry, Mom. My mom says I curse too much on the show. What frickin' ever. I was going to say what frickin' ever, and I got scared. While filming Splendor in the Grass, Natalie brought up her fear of water with the director. A few days before shooting the reservoir scene, Wood confided to the director and said that she had a, quote, huge terror of water, particularly dark water, and being helpless in it. So fucking weird. Right after filming, Warren and his girlfriend broke up and Natalie caught Robert cheating. Here's how it happened. Natalie woke up in the middle of the night and noticed that Robert was not in their bed. Allegedly, the actress opened a door while looking for him and found him intertwined, this is a quote, intertwined with his butler. Tefi, yes? Do you mean maid? Nay. Nay, I mean butler. So obviously they break up, and Natalie obviously took the breakup very, very hard. Quote, he was a man. No, that's not the quote. Quote, it was more than a final straw. It was reality crushing the fragile web of romantic fantasies with sledgehammer force. And so did the rest of the world. I cannot emphasize again how famous they were. The world mourned their breakup. Their relationship was everybody else's Roman Empire. Elizabeth Taylor said she was so shaken by this breakup that she was bedridden, which is so Elizabeth Taylor to make everything about Elizabeth Taylor. But despite that, Warren and Natalie started dating. In his memoir, Robert claims he became so jealous of Warren Beatty, he started waiting outside of his house with a gun, and he was prepared to kill him. Or fuck him. Butler style. Warren, has anybody ever told you you'd make a very sexy butler? In early 1966, Warren and Natalie had broken up several times, and they were majorly on the rocks. Warren Beatty said that his last conversation with ex-girlfriend Natalie Wood took place in the summer of 1966 when he tried unsuccessfully to get her to play the Bonnie to his Clyde. Later that evening, she attempted to take her own life. After Natalie recovered, she began dating a British producer named Richard Gregson, and she married him in 1969. They had a child together, and they were divorced by 1972 when she suspected that he was cheating. Oh my God. It's so crazy to think about Natalie being like, hey, before I date you, before I marry you, this is my trauma. And they're like, okay, I'm going to wait a couple years before I do the same trauma to you. Ugh. Just 3 months after the divorce, Natalie remarried Robert Wagner. She remarried her ex-husband, Natalie, who fucked the butler. Just saying. Natalie has accepted an invitation to his Palm Springs home and said that Wagner had become wait, hold on. Palm Springs. These freaks are in Palm Springs. The energy in Palm Springs is so fucking weird. Anyway, so Natalie accepts this invitation from her ex-husband to visit his Palm Springs home and said that Wagner had, quote, become a man instead of a boy, and she had felt that he had finally grown into the partner that she had always wanted. They blended families, raising their daughters from Natalie and Robert's prior marriages, and then welcomed their only child together, Courtney, in 1974. Which brings us to November 1981. So Natalie Wood invites Christopher Walken, yes, Christopher Walken, who was 38 at the time, and she's currently filming the movie Brainstorm with him. She says, Christopher, join us for Thanksgiving weekend on her 60-foot yacht off the Catalina Island. Natalie Wood's body was found in the Pacific on that fateful night. On November 28th, Natalie, Robert, and Christopher go to dinner in a town on the Catalina Islands. What happens next is largely speculation. After this dinner, they got back to the boat and Natalie goes to bed. A bit later, Robert went to look for her and she was gone until Natalie Wood was found face down in the Pacific Ocean wearing a flannel nightgown, red down jacket, and blue wool socks. Christopher Walken and Robert Wagner are the only two men who might have answers, yet they have maintained their innocence. Christopher Walken has only ever said a few things on the record about that night. In an interview with People magazine in 1986, he says bluntly, "She slipped and fell in the water. I was in bed then. It was a terrible thing. It's a fucking bore." And I think what he means by it's a fucking bore is not that this is so boring, but it's such a shame because she was such a talented, incredible actress and friend. You know, I think he's saying like it's such a waste. You know, she was so amazing. I think that's what he's trying to say. Later in Playboy, he expanded. Anybody there saw the logistics. It was raining. She probably went out to move the dinghy. The dinghy's like the small boat next to the boat that takes you from like an island to the boat. It was raining. She probably went out to move the dinghy. She couldn't swim. It was slippery. What happened that night, only she knows. Robert has maintained that everyone on the yacht was happy until Natalie suffered a freak accident. Quote, "During dinner, I got into a political debate with Walken, and we continued it aboard the yacht. There was no fight, no anger, just a lot of words thrown around. They all boarded the boat, and then Natalie left after about half an hour, and then they sat talking for about another hour. Robert went to kiss her goodnight, and she was missing." But Robert gave a very vague alibi. They were in the salon. Salon means like where you sit and talk. Like it's like a living room, right? Shortly after, they noticed she and the dinghy went missing. A few years later, the coroner released a book that says this, and I quote, "When she first fell off the swimming step into the water, why didn't she simply swim a few strokes and reboard the yacht by way of the step? It must have been only a few feet away from her. Even with the heavy jacket, she could have accomplished this effort easily." The more we hear about the witnesses, however, the more we learn that there was more going on. A man named John Payne, for example, who was sleeping on a boat that was anchored next to the Splendor, that's their boat, said that around midnight, he heard a woman yelling, "Help me, someone, please help me." He woke up his girlfriend, who said she heard a man's very drunken voice respond mockingly, "Okay, honey, we'll get you." There was another man on the boat that night, the ship's captain, Dennis Davern. In Vanity Fair's detailed coverage, they say Dennis maintains that Natalie Wood's fatal fall was not an accident, but the final act in a 2-day drama of jealousy and rage, fueled by round-the-clock drinking. Dennis talks about how Natalie was a partier, narc, and often chased quaaludes with wine, narc. Mind you, it's 1981, so everybody fucking does that. He also said that Natalie was kind of infatuated with Christopher Walken and would openly flirt with him in front of Robert. The day before Natalie Wood dies, she and Christopher spend a day ashore drinking, and Robert arrives to meet them. The captain recalls that they were, quote, out of it, giggling and laughing. Dennis claims that while everyone was drinking and talking, Robert Wagner grew angry as Natalie Wood and Christopher Walken laughed together, seeming to ignore him. So that doesn't sound like a political date to me, but more a political debate about threesomes. Threesomes gone wrong sucks. I can imagine them saying, "Hey, it's Thanksgiving. Let's invite Christopher Walken. He'll fuck me. He'll fuck you. Guess what? He likes the girl more. Tale as old as time." Dennis says he then heard a fierce, drunken argument between Robert and Natalie, followed by things being thrown, shouting, and the fight moving towards the back of the yacht. He continues that when he suggested turning on the floodlights to search for her, Robert Wagner stopped him, saying not to do anything that might attract attention or alert others. According to the former county rescue boat captain, Natalie likely would have been saved if Robert or Christopher had called sooner. Which is exactly what I would say if I couldn't find her. I'm just saying the rescue people didn't rescue her and are blaming the people that are not trained to rescue people. I'm just saying. The rescue boat captain said that when he questioned Robert about why the authorities weren't called sooner, Robert said, quote, "We thought she was off on another boat, screwing around, because that's just the woman she is." You think that she went to go have an orgy on another boat in a flannel nightgown and blue wool socks? Ah, yes, flannel, the common apparel of an everyday whore. If I showed Robert Wagner a picture of Scrooge McDuck ready for nighttime sleepy time, would he say, "Harlot"? Would he be like, "Put him in something Butler-like if you want to be a real fucking minx"? I am not going to let the Butler thing go. I can't. Okay? I can't. Approximately 6 hours later, Natalie's body was found floating face down in the Pacific, about a mile away. The 13-foot inflatable dinghy that had washed up on the rocks, its ignition key switched to off, the gear shift in neutral, and the oars up in a locked position. Tefi, why does this matter? This matters because the dinghy was clearly not used, implying that if she was killed by Robert, he probably cut the dinghy loose afterwards, trying to make it look like she just took off. The autopsy showed that Wood died of drowning and that her body had, quote, superficial skin bruises on the arms and lower legs and a vertical mark on the left cheek, which might have been caused by falling into the water. The police commissioner concluded that Natalie fell into the water while trying to board the dinghy because there were nail scratches on the smaller boat. The toxicology report comes back. She has an alcohol level of at least 0.14%. So she was drunk. She was drunk. I think in my heart of hearts, we will never ever know what happened. And listen, this is coming from someone that loves to get intoxicated on boats. If her alcohol level was at 0.14%, I can only imagine what Robert and Christopher's were. If something did happen where there was a scuffle which led to Natalie's death, I don't think they remember it. I think these people were blacked out on boats. And it just kills me because Natalie was so scared of the water. Everybody that loved her probably knew how scared she was to be in that water and die by her biggest fear. Now, Natalie Wood comes from a different era of Hollywood, okay? As if the wine and Quaaludes aren't an indicator enough of that time, you know? But she doesn't have her daily thoughts timelessly like etched into TikToks and Instagrams. You know, this is a woman that we remember through her timeless work. But I think what's the real nightmare is that her last moments are remembered through the eyes of men that wanted her and the studios and the people in that studios that have been taking advantage of her since she was 4 years old. There's obviously a true crime element here. And we are living in a time where there's more interest than ever in those real stories. But it's important to highlight that this is a real person who will never see her kids again, who will never see her friends and her loved one, and them her. And I want to make sure that these people are remembered as people and not just entertainment. The real true crime element here is that you can be around people you love and trust, and no one will ever know the truth and what happened. These people are more than just headlines and entertainment. Although the Butler bit is a bit entertaining.